Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of On the Flip Side. Today we have Atul Monga with us, who is the founder of Basic Home Loan. Atul, over to you. Just a brief introduction of yourself, and then we'll get started with the questions.
Thanks, Shreyas. So as you mentioned, I am the founder of Basic Home Loan. But before starting Basic, there have been a lot of things which I have done previously. See, I graduated from IIT Delhi in 2009. Then I worked as an investment banker. I worked with Credit Suisse, mostly in Asia, primarily in Hong Kong and in Singapore, working in financial institutions group for M&As, IPOs of banks and insurance companies. In the later part of my career, as in the investment banking side, I worked mostly with Chinese tech companies and Southeast Asian tech companies for their IPOs. So after seeing all these startups getting into IPOs, that was the time I realized that in India also startup ecosystem is booming. So in 2015, I moved back to India. I started working in the Indian fintech space. Given my financial background, so, fintech was the ideal space for me. I worked as a business head with a company called Rubik, and before Basic, I was working as a business head with Policy Bazaar, a part of Paisabazaar, team. I was building affiliates business over there. So so it's been around 7 years now in the fintech space, and I have seen that most of the innovation in India in fintech in lending primarily is happening on the unsecured side, whereas secured businesses like mortgages, especially the affordable housing loans, where there is a huge push from the government and there is a huge demand in the country, and it's also something which is required. That's the basic human necessity. That's why we name the company Basic, and we thought of starting something here. So that's how we started Basic. It's been a year now, and it's been a good journey. We are growing month on month, and we're present in around 300 districts, helping customers in getting their dream home fulfilled.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear, Atul. So before we dive into the journey of Basic and how you got to building it, let's take a step back and let's address the thing. Ab corporates में थे इतने, you worked with a lot of companies to bring about their IPOs, and आप फिर I think you were also in Rubik, right? So what was the trigger जहाँ पे आपको लगा यार यहाँ पे I think I need to go down and do something because और कोई तो कुछ कर नहीं रहा है, and this is something that I can disrupt. I can disrupt as a founder. I think I'll be the person who can make it in this.
See, I entered into the entrepreneurship or startup ecosystem not because that I had an idea and I wanted to execute it. I worked for around 6-7 years as an investment banker, and believe me, if you ask any investment banker, 6-7 years are more than enough. And especially when you see other companies founded by entrepreneurs in their early or late 20s getting into IPOs, you feel excited that this is something which can be done in India also. And then I got a very good advice from someone that in current time, and I'm not sure whether someone believe it or not, but I believed in that in today's time, if anyone has to achieve dreams, then there are only 3 places in the world. One, US, because it's always the place of dreams. Second, China. Third, India. So being an Indian, I thought of coming back to India. I didn't have any idea. Means I just left my job, came back to India and started looking for jobs in within the startup industry. For the next 5-6 years, I worked as an employee in a startup, in 2 startups. I learned that how businesses are built, how teams are set up, how processes are set up, and when I had a confidence that I can do it on my own, and I also had the idea, because when you're working in that ecosystem, you get to know the holes, you get to know the problems which exist. So as I told you earlier, that I got to know that all the innovation is on the unsecured side. You are getting a lot of companies who are doing business loans, personal loans, or even credit cards, but no one is working on mortgages. So that's how the idea came, and we started Basic.
बिल्कुल. So talking about the Indian digital lending landscape, I think when you started working with Rubik and when you entered the fintech ecosystem, काफी nascent था वो time पे, and it's evolved a lot right now, and you are at the core of ecosystem working with these lending startups. So what is your view on it? आपका like overall segment का आपका क्या view है? Where do you see this heading? Or do you see this just fizzling out because regulations will essentially hamper the growth? क्या आपको लग रहा है कि regulatory point of view से भी जैसे अभी OCEN guidelines आ रहे थे and OCEN का API structure आया, तो what do you think about that? Do you think it will foster the growth, or do you see regulations just hampering it in the end?
See, regulations are not to hamper the business. It is just to make sure the business is conducted in a good way. Definitely,
Agreed.
a regulator listens to the startups, and a lot of new structures have been proposed, and new kind of things have been implemented. And in fact, India is one of the countries where, in terms of fintech, we have leapfrogged as compared to the developed economies. Means no one has UPI outside India. I mean, it's such a big thing. And yesterday only that account aggregator framework
Yes,
has become
yes.
active. So I believe that a ecosystem will expand, and there is a good push from government also to have digitization. And yeah, you mentioned it right that in 2015 it was a very nascent stage in terms of fintech. I can tell about lending. Yes, it was very nascent. The most of the companies which you had were primarily marketplaces or comparison websites. But now people have built products. People have expanded vertically as well as horizontally. So you see, people like us, we are into niche market of mortgages. Then there are people who are doing gold loans. Then there are people who are doing exchange, export financing. So people are getting deeper into one product and building technologies. And obviously, to change the industry, you face obstacles. But I believe regulations are not that hard. And once you have a significant amount of presence of a lot of companies in a particular segment, the regulator also listens, and things are being improved. I believe that in future, lending would primarily become online. People, because it's a fact. I'll tell you one data point. In India, if you see RBI's data,
Mhm.
60% of loans are done by commercial banks are only done in Delhi and Maharashtra. That's a
Right,
fact. So you can
right,
see the
right.
penetration of loans in India. Means Bangalore, Chennai, Kolkata, all major cities are just 40%. Think about tier 2, tier 3 cities. So those people also now need loans. Means we are as a society moving to the stage where people now are not fearing from the credit. They believe that it can help them to grow. So for the penetration into the ecosystem, technology is the only way. So I believe it will grow.
Definitely, definitely. I think that's a very valid point that you made. And since you told me that you are essentially, moving to different cities across country and then penetrating into the tier two, tier three cities, and since you are a digital infrastructure as well, what is the problems that you have faced, or what are the challenges that you have faced? Basically, making the population of tier two, tier three people adopt a digital lending system, or as of now, have you seen them very accepting and embracing this technology?
See, even in tier 2, tier 3 cities, now people use all kind of, technologies. People are aware about it. So it's not the problem from the demand side, I'll say. The problem is more from the supply side. When I tell about the problems of my business, it's difficult for banks to adopt new technologies. And it's not because they don't want to do it, but it's because of their structures. They have so many people, so many branches. So to implement a simple technology solution requires a lot of training of each and every staff in their company, in their all their branches. So that adoption is slow, but it's not like that it's not happening. It's happening, and over a period of time, we will have a slow and steady growth. So that's again, that will, I'll say, the major challenge we face. Then obviously the second challenge is to find the right people, because if you ask good say IIT graduate or IIM graduate to move to a tier 2, tier 3 city, it becomes difficult for us to convince that person to move there and set up business. So these are the problems we face, but over a period of time we are trying to solve it, and as of now I have been somewhat successful in that.
Got it, got it. So coming finally to the home loans segment, as you correctly mentioned, right? I think that is the least digitized lending product as of now. Why do you think that was it, and how do you think you are going to disrupt it using Basic? And also, while we are at it, if you could just give a brief about how Basic does that.
Sure. See, we want to digitize mortgages, but as of now, mortgages are offline primarily because of the fact that we don't have a centralized database of properties. So the thing is that it's an asset-backed lending, so I have to evaluate the asset. Unlike gold loans, where I can go directly to a internet, to website and see what is the current price of the gold, I cannot do that for a property. And we don't have a database that I can send an API request and I get to know what is the valuation, what is the legal and the technical standing of the property. So someone has to go offline and do that. So that's a challenge in India, and especially if you see the rural part or the tier 2, tier 3 part, it again becomes more challenging. So what we have done is, to explain what Basic do, we have taken a phygital approach. So we thought of other industries, like in ride hailing, kind of industry. Ola and Uber cannot teleport a person from one place to another. So
Right.
actual fulfillment of the journey happens offline, but they have built technology so that you can track the application. You can get the taxi through an app, and then you can track the movement of the taxi, and it gives you a better experience. Similarly, for food delivery companies, on Swiggy or Zomato, you can see that how your food is being is coming to your home. You cannot directly send food to someone's plate by teleporting it. So we took similar kind of approach. So on our platform, we have with the lenders with whom we work, we have got paperless login facilities. So you till sanction, the journey is completely paperless on our platform. So we deploy a network of agents. These agents actually go to the customer, they put in their details in our app, and then they qualify them for a bank and then do the application. So you get the sanction online. Once the sanction is provided, then my agent helps the customer in the offline fulfillment, where you have to collect the documents and give it to the bank. So it's a phygital kind of model. So since we need agent present in different cities, so that's why we are going city by city. And my agents are educated people, they are financially literate. These consist of people like chartered accountants, financial advisors, property dealers.
Okay.
So those kind of people are there in my network, and these people actually help our customer in doing end-to-end fulfillment rather than just passing on leads to the bank.
So rather than acting just as DSAs or basically lead originators, these are customer. They are basically hand-holding the customers through the entire journey.
Yeah. See, for bank and again on the affordable loan segment, the thing is, banks operate through branches, and now once you operate through branches, your costs are fixed. So every bank has an affinity to do big ticket loans. Means a small ticket loan is not of that interest to them, but these affordable housing loans form part of priority sector lending. So most of the banks, they buy books from smaller housing finance companies at premium at the end of the year to avoid penalties. So what we have done is, we have made our model in this way, and if I write it in an equation, we have converted the branch cost of the bank into technology cost and the agent cost. Now technology cost is variable because till the sanction everything is done through technology, so it's not a fixed cost. And then my agent cost is also variable because I pay my agents only if the disbursement is done. So since my costs are variable, I'm able to do small ticket loans, and that's why we can focus more on affordable housing segment. As of now, we have disbursed close to 350-400 crores of loan in 12 months time, and 70-80% of my loans are less than 40-50 lakh rupee amount.
Makes sense. So I think these, specifically when you look at housing loan as a product, right, that is probably one of the most difficult loan to get, even for someone who is 5 years down the career and is earning a decent chunk of amount. Getting a housing loan is a pain. I mean, definitely it takes a lot of, like the bank does a lot of credit research, even on a cream segment, and then there is a lot of background research that goes on to identify whether the customer will be making that kind of money in the future or not, and all of that. So when you essentially take this model and put this into a tier 2, tier 3 kind of a person profile, how do you guys address that, and how essentially this is how essentially are you able to give out loans that banks are normally not or probably don't give?
So what we have done is, in our app, we have digitized the credit policies of the bank. And obviously banks will not share their 100% policy with us because it's their IP. So we have around 70-80% of their policies with us. So if when my agent sits with my customer, so they put the complete agent profile as well as the property profile in our app, and then we show them the offers. It is not like simple filters which most of the web aggregators use, that what is your salary range, what is your age range. We actually create a credit assessment memo at the back. So it's like we are front loading the credit activity and then we show the offer. That is the reason our login to sanction rate is 70%. Because we are actually using the credit policies. So, my customer gets to know where and in which bank they will be able to get the loan, and that helps us in better conversion for the customers.
Got it. So this essentially is improving access to housing loans for slightly lower income segment, middle and lower income segment.
See, in India, the problem is not that we don't have funds for lending. See, there are around 90 housing finance companies in India, and it's such a lucrative business that everyone is jumping into it. Means Mr. Adhar Poonawalla is buying Magma Housing. Everyone wants to enter into housing finance business because it's a secured loan, and it's in that segment where people generally, for them, the home is the only saving they will have. That's the only asset they build and give it to their children when they retire. So it's a secured loan. But the problem is not that we don't have funds. The problem is distribution of funds. As I told you, bank operates through branches, and it is difficult to reach each and every corner of the country by making building branches. And but through my agents, they can be present anywhere. Means any chartered accountants are present everywhere in India. Sitting in Gurgaon, we have done a loan in Tripura. We actually disbursed a home loan in Tripura sitting in Gurgaon because my agents were present there, and the agents are using my app where we have the digitized credit policies.
Got it. Makes sense. I think this is essentially, if you gain a lot of traction, I think this will essentially enable a lot of middle and lower income household members also to get a housing loan as well, right? Which otherwise would be difficult for them, since either the bank branch penetration is a problem or the ticket size is a problem due to bank's fixed cost component, as you rightly said. So I think we touched this topic earlier as well when we were talking during the introduction piece. But why do you think the housing finance segment has been the most difficult to digitize as of now? And there are hardly any players who has been able to truly digitize the entire end-to-end process of a housing loan.
I told you that the first reason is that we don't have a database of the properties where I can actually go and check the property. And in fact, if you see in India, not most of the properties are not registered. Means people actually avoid registries to save the cost. So they will enter into a power of attorney kind of agreement, and there are different kind of properties. Means if you go to Bangalore, there are Khata A property, Khata B property. Every bank funds a different type of property. Then in Gurgaon side, you have Gram Panchayat kind of properties, Lal Dora properties. So every bank has their policy. So it's a very complex product. And secondly, if you see from the customer side also, mortgage is one of the biggest liability you can take in your life. Means it stays with you for next 10, 15 or even 20 years. So customer also don't want to impulse buy it online. For personal loan which you have to repay in 2 years, and it's a 2-3 lakh rupee loan, people can buy it online. But when it comes to a say 30 lakh, 20 lakh, 25 lakh rupee loan, affordable housing segment I'm talking about, and if it is a normal segment, as in for middle income group segment, which can go up to 1 crore of home loan, no one wants to just buy it online through some kind of tele-assisted model, or maybe through some kind of web portal. They need a face, they need a hand holding. That is why if you see my agent model is working well, because there is someone who is sitting with customer. So customer knows that I can catch hold of this person in case something goes out. So that's the reason complete digitization has not been possible in mortgages. So our digital model has become very successful in this space.
Got it. So do you envisage a complete digitization even in your organization for this entire piece in near future or in the upcoming listing?
See, I believe that till the time we don't have this database, it will not be possible to completely digitize the mortgages. Yeah, you can provide sanctions, but the after the sanction there is a process to do the legal and technical evaluation of the property, where third parties are deployed who go take the snap of the property and then go to the court to check whether there should not be any court cases pending. Now this needs a lot of digitization I'll say for next 7 to 10 years. I don't see that happening. So but this process would need to be carried out offline. Yeah, for the new buildings which are coming up or the new projects which are coming, there you can have pre-approvals. So people are doing that. As in the builder go to the banks directly and they have a pre-approval. Now it's more or less like a personal loan. You just have to evaluate the customer. But those properties are very less as compared to the overall properties, and especially in tier 2, tier 3 cities. In fact, we have customers who want to take loan against property. They don't want to buy a home loan. They want to take a loan against property. They don't have papers of the property. Why? Because they said that my ancestors are living in this house. Everyone knows this is my house. We don't have a property paper. So you tell me, how will you do the lending? So these all things, it will require a lot of changes and a digitization in the ecosystem, and then you will be able to digitize the mortgage. So for I'll say near or medium range future, it would be difficult to completely digitize the mortgages.
So maybe the 2030s will bring about the digitization of the entire home loan process.
Yeah, see, if it becomes completely digital, it will be good for me. The reason is we are already ready with everything. When I am providing sanctions, after sanction, the disbursement stage is very simple because you have already done the decisioning. You just need to sign the agreement. And if we are able to do that online, then it will further save costs for us.
So I think, as you mentioned, the main two hindrances right now are essentially identifying and valuating the property that the valuation is correct. And secondly, as you said, I think the legal standing of the property, the court cases, and if it's under conflict or not, all of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think those two data points are something that are completely off the internet right now. They are completely offline, maintaining files in court cases and all of that.
Yeah, government are different state governments are building databases of this, but again, even if they build this database, that will only for those properties which are registered, and as per my knowledge, not even 20% of properties in India are registered.
20% are only 20% are registered.
Yeah, remaining are under different kind of like general power of attorney. Or it was an agricultural land, so it's a Gram Panchayat property. So you go to a Patwari in Gram Panchayat that he has written it that it belongs to you. So those kind of databases, how will you digitize?
Agreed.
That's a difficult thing, and it's a long-term task to do.
So in the, let's say, next couple of years, where do you see basic home loan going? What is your direction? What direction are you planning to go?
See, I have not thought about years, but yeah, we make plan for next 6 months and then we execute it and then make 6 months plan. So in next 6 months, we gonna enter into at least 40-50 cities. We'll be present. We have made the list of those cities where we want to expand to, and then we are even planning to start our own lending. We will introduce our own product. So and we don't want to compete with banks or housing finance companies. We want to fill the gaps. So there are some very niche profiles where customers are not able to take home loans or not able to take loans at a good rate, and they have to go to settle with a very high rate of interest, or they are not able to customize the loan properly for them. So we are introducing our own product also, where we'll be lending in partnership with a bank. And these are the two things which we are currently focused on. And then there are a lot of other technology things which we are building to digitize some kind of ecosystem.
Got it. This sounds really interesting. Now, broadening the theme back to a bit more generic piece, since you have been into the PE industry as well as been an entrepreneur yourself for almost more than half a decade, what would you what advice would you give to someone who is freshly starting a startup or a fintech startup, and what are the basic do's and don'ts that you would give them, since that you have been on both the sides, essentially as a investor as well as someone who has run a startup? So what are the do's and don'ts that you would give to an entrepreneur?
See, I'll say if you are starting a company and in the beginning, think of it like a shop. Most of the people get infatuated with this thing that they start burning a lot of money on digital marketing and all. From day one, we have focused on profitability. We try to save cost wherever it is possible, and try to focus on profitability. People are currently, if you see, I meet a lot of entrepreneurs. They just want to increase the scale, but profitability is important. See, after 11 months of our operations, we are not profitable on our operations level. This is just because of the fact that in the beginning only we had that mentality. So in the beginning, as I said, think of your company like a shop. You have to take care of each and every expenses, write it down, see where you can bring efficiency. Once it grows, then you think it like a small scale industry. Then it becomes big. Then you think it like a company. You grow your mindset like that. Stop, spending on things which are not required in the beginning. Work on a bare bone model, means where you can have some initial traction, and you know what is your path to profitability. I'm not saying that you should have profitability, but you should know the path, that when you are going to become profitable. That's very important, because whatever you say that there is a lot of liquidity in market, people are funding, but at the end of the day, if not now, then after 5 years, everyone will want you to have profitability. So you have to build it in your DNA from day one, that our focus is on profitability. We know how we'll become profitable, maybe not today, but after 3 years, we know the path. So that path should be clear to you.
Agreed. I think most of the entrepreneurs who essentially, even as early stage entrepreneurs that I've seen in the fintech ecosystem, they are infatuated with the mindsets of likes of Zomatos and Ubers, which are building big D2C brands, wherein they need to burn that much cash to essentially gain customers, right? In fintech, I don't think that's a necessity, specifically with the business like lending and all of that. Profitability is a lot more important.
Yeah.
and that mindset has to be cultivated. Agreed. I think that
In fact, I have seen people raising seed rounds and then doing a lot of YouTube advertisements and all just to explain their product. I believe that in the beginning you should, put money more on operations and customer service. That even if you should not acquire 10 customers, acquire for 2 customers, but those 2 customers, if they are given good service, good and they give you good feedback, they will automatically bring the remaining 8 customers to you. So I believe people should spend more on that side rather than spending more on the marketing side.
So main dues are profitability mindset and keeping in sustainability.
And then definitely, again, second point which I'll tell anyone is that, don't be greedy about equity. If you are getting good people, try to share it with them, because I can tell you, no one makes company better, if you have good people around you. If you think someone deserves some, in the beginning, you might not be able to give a market compensation to someone, but just to, give them some sweetener, or if you want to have them with you as a founder, you should share that equity with them. I've seen many people, being very greedy in the early stage, that, I don't want to dilute too much, I don't want to give equity, and then after 1 or 2 years, their company shut down. Now, what is the purpose of that 100% equity which you own if the company don't survive? It's better to share it with people, with good people. I'm not saying with everyone, but good people. Get them on board. A good team will always succeed.
Agreed. I think that is also really important. One of the early stage founders that I really recently had a conversation with had an idea level plan, and we were speaking about how essentially you should go ahead and talk with angel investors. And one statement that he said, that resonated with the point that you made right now. He was talking about diluting 5% equity for 1 CR worth of fundraise, and at that point of time, he's like, "यार इतना ज़्यादा equity मुझे dilute नहीं करना ये point पे." I'm like, भाई तेरे पास इस time पे idea के अलावा और कुछ नहीं है. Whatever comes in and whatever expertise you're getting it for free, and the person is risking that 1 CR. So I think that makes sense that you give them the 5% or more.
Yeah.
I think that sums it up pretty much. Anything else that you would like to add to the entire conversation?
I think we discussed a lot. If you have any specific questions, more than happy to answer those.
I think we covered everything. Atul, it has been great having you here. This has been a really conversation with you. Thank you so much for joining us.